Well, we're going to start. Tonight, we're going to talk about a Mexican coin, which is the most famous coin of the Mexican Revolution or a Civil War. And this coin is called the Muera Huerta peso because underneath the eagle, you can see the famous or infamous legend of Muera Huerta. This eagle did not have anything to do, or the legend, with becoming the most famous coin of the revolution at the time, but rather later on in time. And it was thanks to an American of which we're going to be talking about. And we'll talk about a little bit of more in depth in a minute. This is the most important finding in any Mexican coin in the revolution time. And we're going to see why and how it happened. I'm not sure if you remember where you were in January 26th of 2023, but I can tell you immediately where I was. I was in my house and I was doing probably some editing of images for presentations like this. And all of a sudden I received a phone call. And the phone call said, Ricardo, I want to offer you a book. It was from my good dear friend, Burton, Bruce Burton. And he said, do you have a such and such book? And I said, yes, I do have it. And he said, well, you're not interested in the book? And I said, well, I have 2 copies and I don't collect books. He said, are you sure? And I said, yes. And then he told me the most outrageous sentence I have ever heard on this century. He said, well, Ricardo, because in this book, I found letters, and one of them is in Spanish. And I said, what do you mean letters? That is the book that he wanted to sell me. It's a 1933 book regarding to the Mexican Revolution coins. The book is not particularly rare, and these are the 2 pages of a letter that he could not read in Spanish. And I asked him to take a picture of them and send it to me. And when I read them, my eyes almost dropped from my sockets. He said that this came from a guy that he knew because he has sold books from him, and his name was Prado, Alberto Prado. So immediately I said yes, and having this provenance, this letter could not be taken lightly. To understand this letter, we need to go back a little to understand what was the Mexican Revolution at the time of these coins. We had a dictator, nothing new in Latin America, from 1877 to 1911, with a little gap between 1880 and 1884. And this dictator happened to be defeated by this short guy from the northern side of Mexico. His name was Madero. Madero uh, uh, was successful in deposing this dictator, and a small interim president happened to be, and this guy was there just to hold elections, on which became president. The problem with Madero is that he was educated in the United States and in France, and that gave him a lot of liberalism in how things should be run politically in Mexico. The problem is that Mexicans were, and more than likely are not still ready for a full democracy. So one way or another, his presidency was, betrayed by the guy that should be in charge of his well-being. His name was Victoriano Huerta. And once he killed the Mexican president, he became the Mexican Rasputin for us, meaning he was hated by everything and everybody. Immediately, it was a big cry saying, Viva Madero, long live Madero, y muera Huerta, death to Huerta. This cry was mainly to make sure that the ideals of Madero didn't die with his person, and that other generals were going ahead with these things. One of the persons that arose from this betrayal of Madero was Pancho Villa, who was famous in Mexico and famous in the United States at the time and eventually infamous because of the raid in Columbus, New Mexico in 1916. But I'm going ahead of myself. We're in 1913 at this point. And Villa went to Chihuahua, got a couple of towns, then got the whole state at the end of 1913. And then he went to the neighboring state of Coahuila. And that's where he started his first issues in paper money. And this is one of the most scarce paper money in the history of Mexico because it was on behalf of a German bank. And this paper money is very elusive, especially because, as you may assume, Germans are very interested in this being the unique series of paper money that they made in the whole new world. After they took this town of Torreon, they couldn't hold this town for a long, and a couple of months later, this town fell into the forces of Huerta. And this town of Torreon was defended um, for these 2 months by this guy named Calixto Contreras, who looks like Mexican, dressed like a Mexican, and was through and through one of the biggest Mexicans that I can think of in that at the time. This time, this town fell at the end of December, in the beginning of December of 1913, and he and his, right hand had to flee. And while the first one went to a train station, this second guy, Severino Ceniceros, went to his hometown that was close by, and that's where the whole story began. From Torreon, which you can see in this map right here, he went to the town of Cuencamé, who was his birth town, his hometown, and it is separated by 113 kilometers, which means more or less about 72 miles or so. I always thought that these coins were made in, the city hall or something, but I was wrong. These coins were made 2 blocks or 2.5 blocks north in a hardware, store today, which is this building right here. This building is where these coins came. There's no plaque. There's not any pompous or pilgrimage place to go and visit. It's just a hardware store building, and probably the majority of this population they don't have the idea that such coins were minted there. All right. Calixto Contreras and Severino Ceniceros were the authors of this coin, according to the books. And if you read these books, they killed Huerta in January of 1914. And as I said before, they didn't kill him literally, but rather in a coin. And this is the coin that the first style of the coin that bore, this very famous legend in today's days. These coins are, even for American standards, these coins are ugly, absolutely ugly. And when I give my seminars in the American Numismatic Association, I always tell them the ugliest the coin is in Mexico, the most expensive is going to be. This poor eagle has the face of a frog, and of course, the snake doesn't even have an eye. It looks like anything but a snake. Look at the strikes of the letters. They're made very crudely. You can see that is nothing but, lines that were made probably with a screwdriver or something like that. And, just kind of embellished a little with the S's to make them a little round. That tells you how crude the situations and circumstances were when these coins were made. This first style is called the 6-star Muera Huerta, and this is by far the most expensive and difficult coin to get. And whenever you find them in an auction, and I have a friend of mine that has been waiting for at least 5 years, they fetch very good prices. This coin says the United States of Mexico because Mexico in 1950, in 1905, we tried to copy the United States name as if by the virtue of magic, all our problems were going to go through out of the window. And of course, it didn't happen. All right, so these coins actually circulated. This lady was Edith Shaughnessy. She was the wife of the attaché, or the in charge, the person in charge of the Mexican affairs, as it was called back then. This is what she wrote about these pesos in March of 1913, in 1914. That's a typo. It should be 1914. And she wrote this entry in his book, in her book, named The Memories of a Mexican, a wife of a diplomat in Mexico. And it was published in 1916. These coins circulated 560 miles away from Durango or Cuencame, and these coins were taken by people that tried to flee from the Mexican Revolution. And she said this on page number 227, because this is the way that these coins circulated in Mexico City itself. There is a legend that said that when Huerta found these coins, he made a decree or a proclamation or some sort of a law saying that these people that had this peso of Muera Huerta were executed immediately right on the spot. But this is just a legend. Where did this legend came from? Because even today, this legend is kind of going into the folklore of numismatists and also sellers. And this legend came by an American that we know very well because he was the first one that wrote the first book about revolutionary coins in 1916, Holland Wood. This gentleman on page 14, he states something that we already knew, that Calixto Contreras and Severino Ceniceros in Cuencame, which is the small town in the state of Durango, coined these coins. All right. And then he said, Huerta was so enraged that he said that anybody would be killed if they had these coins. Who was the source of this information? It's been said, which means he just invented or heard a rumor or something, or he guessed that it was going to happen at some point, or it happened and he didn't just have the law or the proclamation at the time. And the truth is that it never happened. He created a legend because everybody quoted him subsequently, and that's exactly how this legend happened to be. 6 are the main reasons why these coins were made according to different historians. And if you read these 6 different accounts, 4 of them happen to be because Huerta was mad, because let me see if I can return this, because Villa was mad at Huerta. So everybody, 4 out of 6 said that Villa made these coins. And just one person said that these coins were not made, all of them in Cuencame, but some of them were made either in Durango, in the city of Durango, or even as far as Chihuahua City. We will see what happened to all of these. These 2 guys were in charge of the brigade named the Juarez Brigade. They also stamped paper money, which is easier to get than the coins because they're less popular. They made, somebody found a letter on which, in this letter, in good English, it says that the governor of the state of Durango approved these coins, which means that maybe Villa was not as the generals, the brigade of Juarez or of Juarez brigade, to make these coins. What we see through this letter is that they didn't want to put the United States of Mexico. What they wanted to put, or the Constitutionalist Army, rather, what they wanted to put Governor said, don't do that, because if you did that, these coins are going to be thought that they're going to be limited in circulation just where this brigade is working, and not, where the whole constitutionalist army is. And they concurred with this idea, and not because of a letter, but because of the evidence themselves. As I told you, this is the 6-star Muera Huerta, and you can read Estados Unidos Mexicanos, or the United States of Mexico. And these 6 stars were associated with these centavos that were made uh, after these Muera Huerta pesos, and they are exactly the same stars. So this evidence seems to point out that these coins were made also in the city of Durango, as somebody had suggested. So let's see what was the real truth. We know of two different series. The early series, which is the ugliest and the most expensive, and the newest or the most modern series, which is the one on the right. You can see that they're absolutely dismal in distance regarding to style and finish. And if you change one of the sides, the other side had to change as well. This is the old or the earlier design, and this is the newest design. So we know already of two different designs, and on the reverse you can see the on the edge of the eagle on the newer style. You can see a dot and a dash, surrounding the eagle and the legend of Ejército Constitucionalista, or Constitutionalist. This is where the letter was written. This is where Dr. Prado had his office. And this office happened to be at this address, and the building still stands in Los Angeles, for what Google says. This is the letter that the notice that he used to give away. As a dentist myself, that I was at some point, I can tell you that this is one of the most important documents that I have, because all of us knew that Prado was a dentist, but there's not a single document alive that I know of that testifies that he was a dentist. Anyway, going back to our coins, the only thing that my friend Bruce could read was the right document, on which it stated how many coins were made, who made the dice, who did this, that, and the other. And it was a very succinct account. And this account, he found it in September the 4th of 1970. And he published this in a mimeograph newsletter that they used to have in a long gone society called the Aztec Numismatic Society. And their, their their publication was the Plus Ultra. And on page 6, you can see that what Prado did was to copy exactly what he did, as a first draft on the right-hand side. I'm sorry about my voice. I always have a hoarse voice because I'm a teacher, and you imagine that I use my throat very much during the day. These are the two most important things that people knew. And it says that it was a letter that nobody knew of. It was not in his archives, and it was long gone and forgotten. And it says that all of this information he got on a letter that he found. And this letter was dated in August the 20th, 1933. Severino Ceniceros, at the time, was a senator. He passed away in 1937. So we knew of some of these facts. We knew of a letter that was written, but nobody knew where this letter was. And I'm going to tell you what happened to this letter, in my opinion. This letter, he found it, he got it, he put it inside of the book that it was offered to me, and he put it in his library, and his library looked probably like yours and mine, which is a big mess. And that's why this letter was forgotten for these many years. All right, the origin of the letter. At the end of the decade of the 1920s and the beginning of the 30s, some gold coins appeared, more than likely in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, and people started acquiring these coins. It was 20 pesos. They were in gold. They were of absolutely a complete different design. And the ones that owned them and had bought them testified that they were original. People that, were hesitant about getting them said that they were not original. So the thing that they did was to, call, Prado, who happened to be one of the people that knew the most about Mexican coins. And Prado said, well, I don't know, but I will find out. I don't know exactly how, but I'm going to find out how to contact Severino Ceniceros, because he's the only one that is alive right now, because Calixto Contreras died in 1918. But this guy that is still alive may know about these coins. So what he did, he contacted a friend of his in Mexico City, and this is where the letter came. And he said, Señor Licenciado Don Francisco Pérez Salazar, this guy was the mutual conduct between Severino Ceniceros and Prado, and this guy happened to be a good friend of Severino Ceniceros. They were asking him about these 20 gold pesos. And Severino Ceniceros could have said, Señores, these coins are good. Thank you very much. His signature. Or, Señores, these coins are not good. And, you shouldn't buy them. Sincerely yours, Severino Ceniceros. But instead of that, he wrote 2 full pages of the history of these coins. And now we're going to see what they said. In 1914, he said, these 2 guys, under Villa's command, decided to think about making a coin. They didn't know exactly what to put. And Calixto Contreras was the one that came with this idea. It was not mine, said Severino Ceniceros. And then he said, I needed to get some silver. And the silver that we got them of the mines of San Lorenzo and Santa Maria, which were nearby. And, we started trying to do the best that we could to start coining in my house. And all the coins happened to be in my house. That starts, clarifying some of the ideas that they had. He mentioned a distinction on the coins. And whenever I read it, I said, hopefully he's going to be talking about the earlier design and the later design. He couldn't care less. Coins were coins. The only distinction that he made about these 2 coinage was the fact that because of the quality of the iron, it started becoming brittle, and the design started being gone. As a coin collector, you either like these coins that are, all fractured and everything, or you like them pristine. In my personal opinion, like these ones better because, in my opinion, they're more dramatic and they are more interesting to talk about, because usually you see nothing but MS-65 and the coins are absolutely round and pristine. All right. He said that approximately 60,000 of them were made. He doesn't even know the amount exactly. And then this is another important fact. He said that Villa didn't even know about these coins until they were circulating. And when that happened, he asked some of these coins to be shipped to him, but he didn't recall, Severino Ceniceros, how many of them were shipped to Villa. And then he said, we just made them in silver. We couldn't have used gold because gold wouldn't have serviced our needs. And then he said, at the end, hopefully this is going to serve numismatics in the future in the history of these coins. And I like that because the word numismatics was not a common word. So he must have to go and dig what was the proper term for coin collecting. And this is the last part of this letter. This letter is so poorly written. This is not even the original letter. This is a transcript made by a secretary. The last name of Severino Ceniceros is not a common name. As a matter of fact, I've never heard that name before or after this guy is named in the books or mentioned in the books. So the secretary, when she typed this letter, she put Cisneros instead of Ceniceros. If this letter would have fallen into somebody else's eyes, I can assure you that it would have been discarded because number one, the name is not is not associated with these coins, and secondly, because it's in Spanish, and this book happened to be in these hands in the United States of America. I asked him how he got this book, not trying to pry, much less to get into his business, but rather to see the provenance of the book. And he said that it happened to be part of a big estate of books of a very old-time coin collector's son that happened to have them, for the past 25 years. So out of the 6 reasons or causes being mentioned in most of the literature, we can knock down that Villa made these coins because he was mad at Huerta. Because Huerta, Villa didn't know about these coins. Out of these 2, we know that maybe the punches made their way to, the star punches made their way to the city of Durango, but the coins were not made there, but rather in the house of this fellow right here, the lower left. And the only one that was right on that account was Howland Wood. And with that, I finished my presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm at your service. And I'm going to offer you that I made a writing about this presentation. And if you would like to read about this topic, I gladly am going to make this writing available to somebody at the association so you can distribute it. And if you give me a little time, maybe I can get it from my computer and post it right here so people can download it immediately here.
Oh.
I'm at your service. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ricardo. That was very interesting. Very interesting.
I had a question.
Go, Doug.
Yeah, and some comments actually, because I had researched Howland Wood a little bit, kind of in conjunction with some other researching that I'd done, and he doesn't strike me as a guy who would make things up, particularly when it came to numismatics. I mean, he was a bit of a jokester, I think, outside of that, but I think he must have gotten his information, particularly since the rest of it was accurate, from somebody in Mexico who knew what was going on. And so it doesn't seem likely to me that he would make that up.
Well, that's a very good clarification. And what you're saying is absolutely true. I started asking at the American Numismatic Association about Wood's personality, and they said exactly what you just mentioned, that he was a jokester, that he loved to talk about stories and, about numismatics here and there. And you're absolutely right about the rest of the evidence. Everything else that he quoted in that book is very accurate. Maybe he heard about that proclamation, but the thing is this: his book was printed in 1921. If he must have heard about this proclamation, he could have said or dated on such month or by some general or by somebody. My opinion and my assumption is that evidence speaks louder than whatever opinion we may have or interpretation we may have. The fact is that he was the first one that talked about this. He doesn't quote any source, and the only source that he said is "it's been said," and that in itself, it's not very precise, especially whenever you speak about coins. I understand that there were new pieces. They were sold for $2 a piece probably, and nobody wanted them because they were ugly and they were not made in Mexico City. But one way or another, if he got this information from one source or another, in my opinion, he probably should have said, somebody in Mexico City told me this, and it would have been a little less ambiguous than it was, in my opinion. But yes, you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you made this defense on his character, because as a as a numismatist and historian about Mexican coins, he's formidable. And he's such a good character that he made our first book in Mexican revolutionary coins. So that in itself is a milestone. Thank you, Doc.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, by the way. It was very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. You're too kind.
Yes, may I say a few things? This is Mike. Don Ricardo, it's wonderful to see you again. Thank you. I enjoyed the presentation. I want to echo a few things that you said, and then I want to respond to what you and Doug were just talking about. First of all, the coin that you talked about is definitely the coin that most people who collect coins from the Mexican Revolution really strive to have that coin. I mean, gosh, to put that slogan on a coin took a lot of guts to do that. Can you imagine making a coin that's calling for the death of the president? You were laying your life on the line by doing that, especially because of the personality of Huerta. So I still haven't purchased one of those yet. I really, really hope to get one of them someday. And I read your article when it was published in the US Mexna, and it was like a thunderbolt reading what you had found, because believe me, guys, that folklore about the coins being made by Villa because of his hatred for Huerta, it's been passed around for decades, and because it resonates, it makes sense. Huerta had threatened to shoot Pancho Villa at an earlier encounter they had, and through a series of events, Huerta wasn't able to shoot Villa. So, Doug, I don't think that that Wood was I don't think he made it up or anything like that, but I think it just made so much sense that he probably heard it from a couple of people. It just seemed to really be a logical solution to why the coins were made. And also, I want to tell you, I have a couple of copies of that book too, the Howland Wood book. I have one that was bound up in nice leather and stuff like that. It's definitely considered a primary document to those of us who collect those coins. So thank you very much. And I appreciate your presentation.
Yeah, when it came to numismatics, Wood was very, very, from what I have read and seen, very, very accurate. He didn't make things up in that regard. It might be some commentary, but to me it sounds more like he was accurate in other ways. That commentary came from his source.
Yeah, that seems like a good guess. Michael, I see your hand up, but I don't see you.
Well, that's because I got the lights on.
Oh, well.
Well, there we go. Ricardo, thanks very much. I really enjoyed it. It's something I didn't know anything about, and now I feel really educated. So the gold ones were made to deceive, presumably.
Oh, definitely. They were made in the United States, and they were directly aimed to the American collectors.
Yeah, so those are counterfeits.
No, they're fantasies. They're
Fantasies,
not counterfeit,
okay.
they're fantasies.
All
Because they
right.
never
What
exist.
about that other silver one that is more less crude?
Oh, that one.
That seems like a fake too.
Well, the silver ones are good, but be careful if you're going to acquire one of them, because after the story that I have told you, that is the most counterfeited coin of the Mexican Revolution. It has things that you can use in the coin's anatomy to immediately say if it's good or not. The problem is that the planchets are also porous, but the good thing is that they were struck; they were not cast. So anything that you see cast is absolutely and definitely a counterfeit.
But,
Yes.
but you showed another one, the crude one, which you started with. Then you showed another one that wasn't so crude. That seems like it wasn't part of the ones they made at the hardware store.
Oh, they are. Believe me, they are.
So they recut the dies?
No, they realized that they were so ugly that they had to make new dies. So they
So what evidence do you have of that?
the coins themselves.
Well,
Because
yeah, but how do you know that they made them and somebody else didn't make them?
because everything, the two styles are very well recorded in 1921. And there's no gold coin recorded in 1921 by Howland Wood. And when Howland Wood made his book, both coins, both types appear.
Because it seems the second one, you know, the letters are punched.
Yes, I mean, I'm telling you, they made a very good. They took very good care of the second series, and the first one was because they needed to have the money. And my assumption is that whenever you do a first strike, you know, not necessarily you have all the skills that you need. And
So in your letter,
yes,
it had some information about the engraver and the designer, and one of them was crossed out. What does that mean?
he crossed that information out because he didn't put it in that section. He put it down, you know, in the
I
public.
see. I see.
It's a first draft.
So is that engraver someone who's known, or is this the
No,
only thing he ever did?
no, but let me tell you what I found. I'm telling you, these things find you. People say, you know, you made a big finding. I didn't. That thing came and knocked on my door literally on my cell phone. So I was lucky enough to get it. It could have been offered to somebody else, and the price was very cheap. But going back to the topic, um, the the coins that you're referring to came exactly from the house of Severino Ceniceros. And the information that we have comes from that letter in the evidence. He did not say anything about the 6 stars. He didn't say anything on why one design was made over the other. And but the evidence is there.
One might assume that, you know, his memory might have been um, a little fresher for the thing that happened last, which would be the less crude version.
Yes.
And so I guess but so my question is this guy, these people that he named, are
Mhm.
they known for any other numismatic things?
No, not at all. But let me tell you what other thing knocked on my door. And this is the first news that I'm going to share with anybody. I haven't shared this in Mexico. Um, I have a picture made in October the 1st of 1913, November the 1st of 1913, of everybody that was there in charge. And somebody years later, you know, with a shaking handwriting, started naming the people that were there. He made a couple of mistakes when he numbered and named a couple of people, but he mentions that the die engraver is in that picture.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. The problem is that I'm not sure if the guy is there and that's the name and the number or not. But, you know, at least I have a picture of somebody there that is the one that made these coins. And, you know, and this happened in the same year. I mean, I'm shocked that everything is just happening.
That's cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, excellent. John,
A great presentation. It sounds like you were implying that the cruder sample, there were fewer made of those than the second. Is there
Yes.
any information as to that?
No, but let me explain to you why I assume that. Either that or they made, because it was just one pair of dice. All the known specimens, which is probably less than 150 or 200 of that first style, came from one pair of die for the overs, one pair of die, one die for the reavers. It was just one pair of dice. Of the second one, you have about 5 or 6 different die styles, die styles. So being one pair of dice and not making too many of not having too many out that survived makes me believe that, you know, the most that they could have struck on with those dice could have been probably on the verge of 10,000 or so coins. Now, out of those 10,000, my assumption is that once the newer kind came, rumor immediately happened to be that the first ones were no good. So they probably recycled the material to make the new ones. That's what my assumption is. But I cannot prove any of that. Is just, a guess.
Thanks.
Sure.
Educated guess.
So,
Anybody else?
yeah,
Oh, Bill.
so looking at the die breaks on the first one, I would speculate that even 10,000 is too many to have been struck by that pair of dies. That die was shattering relatively quickly, and if it was bad iron, 10,000 would have been a hell of a lot to come off of one set of dies.
Probably, you're absolutely right. Somebody estimated that no more than 2,000 coins were made first die before it shattered completely or something happened to it. I don't know.
How were they struck? What kind of machinery?
Oh, that's a very good question. They found a letter that the ASARCO, which is the American Smelter, an American company that made smelting processes in Mexico and is very, very famous, had a little place right outside of Cuencamen. And these people came before going into Cuencamen and stayed there for about 3 weeks. And they started pillaging materials and machinery from that place. And the manager of that very small smelter complained to the American consulate in 1916 when they were going in 1914 that these people were there and they were pillaging things left and right. And this became part of a general lawsuit that the Americans did against Mexico for damages, during the war. So my assumption is that all this machinery that is being referred very generally as, things to make screws and things like that were adapted to make coins. And that's why they're, so poorly struck.
So it wouldn't have been a hydraulic press or anything like that. This was a screw press?
Yes, my assumption is that they made something as a screw press, because even if they would have confiscated one of those machines, they wouldn't have had, the space or the power or the electricity or the gas to power it. I mean, it would have been smoke everywhere, and it would have been impossible to make. So my assumption is that most of them were handmade or with a very primitive, rotor or something to make them happen.
Oh,
So the names in the letter could actually be associated with the second plus X dies for the nicer piece as opposed to the crude piece.
Both of them were made by the same people.
Okay.
So anything that is being mentioned in that letter has to be associated with both of the coins.
Okay.
And the article that somebody was kind enough to mention is the one that I'm going to share with you guys, because knowledge is knowledge, and this is why we're here, to spread knowledge.